TNA Wrestling held its Genesis pay-per-view tonight in front of a packed house in Garland, Texas, in the Dallas area. And Tom Hannafin on commentary called it a new beginning for TNA Wrestling. This is on the heels of the big announcement this week, the multi-year partnership between WWE and TNA, which has been working with NXT for much of the past year, but they formalized the relationship and now they have an official working agreement on paper between the two companies. And so there's this renewed sense of pride, I guess, if you are a TNA fan right now. There's this renewed sense of optimism as they head into the new year. They had a renewed sense of optimism a year ago when they changed back to the TNA name. And they did really well for their January pay-per-view, and then they fired Scott D'Amore. But now they've got a lot of momentum here as they move forward in 2025. And I will tell you, it has been a while since I have ordered a TNA pay-per-view. But I saw the lineup for tonight, and I knew there would be some NXT influence and potentially some news coming out of the show. And I wanted to check out the show anyway. And I said, why not do a Genesis review and talk a little TNA for a change? And tonight was the night you had to know going into this show that Joe Hendry was finally going to win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, because if it didn't happen tonight, it just wasn't going to happen. He came close at Slammiversary in July. He came close at Bound for Glory in October, and he failed both times. And with Joe Hendry, it's one of those things where you got to go with the hot act when the act is still hot. And you worry that at some point he's not going to be as hot as he is. And then what? Maybe you missed your moment. Tonight, if they would not have had him go over in that main event, that would have been it. Because after 3 times, the fans just lose faith in you. And you don't want that to happen. So he walked into this pay-per-view tonight against Nick Nemeth, his last chance for all intents and purposes. And he finally came away with it. Joe Hendry is indeed your new TNA World Heavyweight Champion. He finally won the big one. Now we wait a couple weeks. We're going to be seeing him, I think, on another pay-per-view. Jordynne Grace is another one who we may be seeing on that other pay-per-view in a few weeks. Tonight was her final night in TNA. She stepped into the ring against Tessa Blanchard, even though she may not have wanted to. But they went one-on-one tonight, and they had what I thought was the show stealer. They tore down the house, and if Jordynne Grace was going to go out, she went out on a high note tonight. We also had a few NXT surprises on the show, including an appearance by the NXT Tag Team Champions Fraxium, who are going to be defending their NXT Tag Team titles against the Rascals this Thursday on the first live episode of TNA Impact in 8 years. Which just so happens to be taking place in San Antonio, Texas. The same San Antonio where WWE will be 48 hours later for Saturday night's main event. And Cora Jade, also from NXT, showed up tonight to confront the TNA Knockouts champion, Masha Slamovich, after her win over Rosemary. And those weren't the only appearances, but those were the main ones. I should also mention that there was another pay-per-view taking place tonight at the Hammerstein Ballroom. GCW held its People versus GCW event. This was their first foray back to the Hammerstein in a couple of years. They had a show a couple of years ago that did not get sterling reviews, including from yours truly. I mean, I remember buying that show, and I had high expectations going into it. And it wasn't a total disaster, but it was pretty much a disaster. And so this was their chance to go back and make people forget about that. And so that was the other show. Obviously, I bought this one, but I bring this up because PCO, good old Pierre the Quebecer, who had a career resurgence a number of years ago, doing this new PCO gimmick. And what is he? He's got to be in his late 50s. And the guy still goes out there and takes these ridiculous bumps. And it's a ridiculous gimmick, but it works for him. And he still can go out there and put on a great show. And he was contracted to TNA, and I wasn't even aware of the fact that apparently his deal ran out at the end of last year, but also he was the TNA Digital Media Champion. So I don't know the circumstances behind this, if his deal really did run out and he had one of their titles. I'm not sure how that even happened, but he was on the GCW show tonight at the Hammerstein, and he won the kickoff rumble. And then he grabs his TNA Digital Media Championship that he had with him. He placed it on a chair, picked up a sledgehammer, and proceeded to smash the championship several times. I saw some of the video. It didn't look like he really did a very good job of smashing it into a million pieces. But he took a sledgehammer to a TNA title at a GCW event. And then he took the microphone, he cut a promo talking about how he sold the most t-shirts out of anybody in TNA while, he was there. And then another person entered the ring to try to calm things down. And as he was continuing rambling on, the live feed cut to a video package. So they cut him off. And this, of course, all took place on the same night that TNA had its main card getting underway for the Genesis pay-per-view. Now, you would look at something like that and go, boy, this is weird, but smells like an angle, right? And as a wrestling fan, you're conditioned probably to think that. Like, is it a work? Is it a shoot? Well, this feels like a work. Well, it doesn't sound like it is. Because Mike Johnson on PW Insider said that PCO is done with TNA. He's told that his deal expired at the end of the year, and that his rant and destruction of a TNA title was legitimate, we are told. So that is going to be a very interesting situation to follow. I'm just curious, again, if his deal expired, why did they have a championship on him? And what are his gripes with the company? So there's going to be a lot more that comes out about this. So it was a very eventful night tonight. And this right here is your TNA Genesis 2025 review. I am the Solomonster, just like old times. We're reviewing TNA. It's been a while. I got to give a quick shout out. Something else that happened on the GCW show tonight. The Amazing Red. The Amazing Red, of course, one of the founding fathers of House of Glory. Always good to see him and chat with him the other day in Chicago. But he was also on the GCW show tonight. And the Amazing Red was surprised at the show tonight by the announcement that he is the first inductee into the 2025 Independent Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And I saw the images. I saw Homicide in there. I think it was after their match. They had a tag match and presented Red with the plaque. They had a plaque all ready for him. And he had a big smile on his face. And that was very, very cool. Red is a great guy. And Red has been a tremendous influence on a lot of talent, even to this very day. I mean, he's training students, and there are people that, pattern themselves after him. There are people that got into wrestling because they were watching him and people like him, back in the mid 2000s and the late 2000s. And to see him be honored in that way is a very cool thing. So I just wanted to make mention of that here. A very worthy honor. And I'll be sure to congratulate him when I see him again this weekend. Mackenzie Mitchell. You may remember her, backstage interviewer from NXT. She was back tonight on the TNA pay-per-view doing the ring announcing duties. Of course, she is married to Vic Joseph, who does play-by-play for NXT. Tom Hannafin and Matt Raywalt handle commentary as they usually do here on these TNA shows. They had two pre-show matches. One was a quick win for Jake Something over Ashanti the Adonis, representing NXT. And Adonis, he got some cheap heat on himself. Told Dallas, how about them Commanders? And he said he was here to kick off the partnership between NXT and TNA. And he was here to issue an open challenge to any TNA star in the back who thinks they can hang with the Adonis. And that brought out Jake Something. And he was ready for a fight. We had a referee, so we had an impromptu match here. This did not go very long. This went barely 3 minutes. Adonis got a little bit of offense, but not too much. And in the end, Something won with his Into the Void finish. So not much to this. The other match had Frankie Kazarian picking up a win over Leon Slater. Fine pre-show match. I don't know what the story was between these two, if any, but the action was good. Slater hit a crazy senton dive over the ring post to the floor. And inside, he went to the top for a 450 splash, but he got distracted by the former Dirty Dango, calling himself JDC now. And Kazarian got the knees up, rolled Slater up with a handful of tights, and picked up the win. The main card opened with the X Division Championship match, with Moose defending against Ace Austin. Moose had Alicia Edwards and JDC in his corner. Austin is a former 3-time X Division champion. They said he was fighting on behalf of his tag team partner, Chris Bay, who broke his neck back in October. We have not gotten any updates on him since then. So between that and the constant mentions of the GoFundMe and the merchandise to support him and support his medical expenses, obviously you could tell just how serious it was. And I don't think he has spoken since then. I don't think he's posted anything on social media. I know there's been no photos or videos from him, so obviously it's bad. And he's on his own now. And so he was challenging for the championship tonight. And immediately, right out of the gate with a shotgun drop kick, they ended up outside the ring. Moose crashed into the barricade. Austin set up for a move on the apron, but he had to stop and kick JDC away. And when Austin went for a springboard move, Moose, he's standing in the ring. He stops him on the top rope, grabs him by the throat, and chokeslams him on the edge of the ring apron, which looked like it sucked. Later on, Moose caught Austin on the ropes, set up for his go-to-hell move, but Austin countered into a Hurricane Rana and used his head scissors to pull Moose off the apron to the floor. And the production team missed it, but they did show a replay of JDC running Ace Austin into the ring post. So Austin was able to avoid a spear and ended up taking out JDC on the floor instead. Did Moose. Moose took JDC out by accident. Austin hit his fold finish on the floor and then rolled Moose back inside. Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers, they make their way out. And Austin spots them, did a Fosbury flop out over the top rope onto them. Quickly heads back to the ropes. He goes for a dive from the middle rope, but he gets speared by Moose out of midair, which led to a great near fall. And so Moose, because they look so much alike, Moose set up for, it's late, cut me some slack. Moose set up for another spear. Austin sidestepped Moose and rolled him into a pin for a 2 count. And in the end, it was Moose who was able to hit 2 more spears, and then he covered Ace Austin for the 3 count to retain the X Division title. Now, when the match was over, Edwards and Myers, they get into the ring. They're all surrounding Ace Austin. When Steve Macklin and Eric Young, they make their way out. They hit the ring, end up hitting simultaneous suicide dives out onto Edwards and Myers. I thought it was a hot opener. Got real good there at the end as it went on. The fans really wanted Austin to take that title. I think it would have made for a feel-good win with the fans chanting for ABC at different points during the match, which of course is his team with Chris Bay. But they told the David and Goliath story with, Austin trying to overcome the larger man, but in the end, Goliath won. Sometimes the story doesn't go the way that you want it to go. So Moose retains. Now, Macklin and Young, they stayed out there for their match, which was up next against the System, Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers. They had Alicia Edwards in their corner. I look at Eddie Edwards, and I'm not saying he's bad, but I just feel like he hasn't changed in 10 years. He's just sort of there to me. Kind of like The Miz, I guess, in WWE. Macklin had Myers hung up in a tree of woe. Macklin was about to charge at him, but Alicia got into the ring and blocked his path. And Myers used the distraction to his advantage. He speared Macklin for a 2 count. Myers went up top. Macklin sent Edwards into the corner, which crotched Myers. And then Eric Young took out Eddie Edwards with a neck breaker. Macklin speared Myers from behind in the corner while Young dove onto Edwards out on the floor. And Macklin hit a double underhook DDT on Myers and covered him for the win. Well, this was definitely an undercard match. Went about 7 minutes. Nothing terribly exciting here. The work was fine, but it didn't move me. We had the Knockouts. Tag team champions, Spitfire, the team of Jody Threat and Danny Luna, taking on Ash by Elegance and Heather by Elegance, the challengers. Now, Ash by Elegance, if you are not a TNA fan, is Dana Brooke from WWE. And when Dana Brooke was in WWE, if you asked me to name the 3 best Dana Brooke matches, I would be sitting here for a very long time trying to think of one match to tell you. And part of that was she never got a serious push. I mean, the biggest thing she ever did was she was running around like they had all the other dopes running around with the 24/7 title. And that was the big thing for her. Yeah, I do recall her once in an interview somewhere saying how she was really pushing for a women's intercontinental title. So I wonder what she thinks about that now. Of course, now she's not there anymore. But the reality is, Dana Brooke was never a feature player. Dana Brooke was never, in ring at the level of the best female performers in that company. And so she was never featured in any serious way. So I can't, give you her resume and tell you, oh, she had all these great matches, because they just didn't exist. Just didn't happen. So when I saw this match in the lineup here, I will tell you my expectations were not very high. Let's just put it that way. But we had the Concierge, who apparently is a Canadian promoter who runs his own company, but he's part of this whole gimmick with them. So he's out in the ring and he does this cheer, with his team before the opening bell. And when they come out, they got pom-poms and everything. So anyway, we start the match. And Heather by Elegance rolls to the floor. Luna goes for a suicide dive. Ash kicks her while the Concierge distracts the referee. So Luna is isolated by the challengers for a little bit. Jody Threat took a hot tag, worked over both challengers. She had Heather pinned when Ash hit her with a Meteora to break it up. And Ash performed a backstabber on Threat. Heather followed with a middle rope double stomp that led to Ash getting a 2 count. Later on, Jody hoisted up Heather and tossed her over the top rope. She barely grabbed the top rope and looked like she smacked the side of the ring on the way down. Luna then booted Ash, who was the legal woman who was on the apron. And Luna stood on the ropes, pulled her over into a German suplex. And then the champions hit their pressure drop finish on Ash and pinned her to retain. I was impressed by the Elegance twins here. Again, I did not go into this with high expectations to begin with. But this, I thought, turned into a fun little sprint. And this was more enjoyable than I was expecting it to be. So I will give it some praise. But I cannot give it the same amount of praise that I will give to this next match. Because this next match was the best match on the entire show. And it was Jordynne Grace and her swan song. They didn't announce it that way, but that's what it was. Taking on Tessa Blanchard. And a lot has been made about Tessa Blanchard's return to TNA. I've addressed it already and given my thoughts on the podcast. The way in which they brought her back, I thought was stupid. Again, it was like smuggling contraband into the country, in the dark of night. Because they knew there was going to be controversy. They knew people were going to be upset. Other people wouldn't be upset. They wanted to give her a second chance. A lot of divided opinion, but a lot of it negative overall, including from the fans when she first showed up and made that surprise appearance. One thing that nobody will say, though, is that Tessa Blanchard is not a good pro wrestler. She can work her ass off. It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of all of the, the outside the ring stuff that has haunted her and basically had her blacklisted for a number of years from many wrestling promotions. But she's back now. Not only is she back, she's back at a time when TNA now has a formal working relationship with WWE. And so if Tessa Blanchard goes on to have herself a really good year in TNA, there's not a doubt in my mind that we're going to see her in WWE at some point, especially with performances like this. Now, Jordynne Grace, the word on the street was that Jordynne Grace did not have any interest in working Tessa Blanchard, but this is what they wanted her to do. They wanted her to put Tessa over since she is likely leaving the company. And so Jordynne Grace is a good little soldier, and she's going to do what she feels is in the best interest of TNA. Because she has carried the TNA flag proudly now for a number of years. All the appearances that she's made with WWE, in the Royal Rumble last year, on NXT last year, she was proudly TNA. And so why would it be any different on her way out? The bell rings, both women charge towards each other in the center of the ring, and they start going at it. And Grace used her shoulder to drive Blanchard back into one of the corners and tossed her across the ring twice. Tessa ended up taken to the floor. Grace hits a suicide dive and then a jackhammer on the floor. All of this happened very quickly. I mean, Jordynne Grace was a house of fire here. She was all fired up. And Grace hoisted Blanchard up on her shoulders and walked up the ring steps with her. Blanchard slipped out and then slammed Jordynne on the ring steps. And so Tessa was healing it up. I mean, she got some incredible heat here from this crowd. Whether it's good heat or not, tonight it was good heat, I guess, because she played into it. But whatever it was, these people did not like Tessa Blanchard. And she tried for a Hurricane Rana. This was still outside. And Grace caught her and held on to her and then flung her headfirst into the barricade. So when Grace then set up for a power bomb over by the apron, Tessa reached up and grabbed the ropes and then double stomped her. Blanchard went up top. Grace cut her off with a palm strike and then joined her on the ropes. And Jordan stood on the top rope and executed a gigantic fallaway slam, which drew holy shit chants from the crowd. Both women are down. They both traded punches as they got to their feet. Grace lawn darted Blanchard into a corner and then hit a sit-out powerbomb for a near fall. Blanchard came back with a destroyer-style move and got a near fall out of it. Grace avoided a hammerlock DDT, put Tessa down with a spine buster. Blanchard grabbed Grace's head while laying on the mat and threw forearms at her, and then Jordan blocked a slap. And she powered up Tessa for a move, but Blanchard slipped out and executed a neck breaker for a near fall. Tessa sent Grace to ringside and then hit her with a twisting dive out over the top rope. Grace came back and hoisted her up before walking up the ring steps, and then she hit a rolling Death Valley driver from the ring steps to the floor. And back inside, Grace got Blanchard on her shoulders while standing on the middle rope. Blanchard executed a crucifix bomb from the ropes for a near fall. And now Tessa is getting frustrated because no matter what she throws at this woman, it is just not enough. And it's around this point in the match. I was wondering how long this was going to take. But it was around this point in the match, and we were pretty late in at this point, that the chant started of, "She's a racist." Chants of "She's a racist" rang out for Tessa. And it petered out after a while. I wouldn't say it lasted too long, but it was definitely noticeable. So Blanchard caught Grace in an octopus hold. Grace slipped out and bounced Blanchard off the top rope and onto the mat. Jordan set up for a deadeye. Blanchard slipped out and put her down with a cutter for a near fall. Tessa pointed to one corner of the ring and then went up top. Blanchard rolled through when Jordan avoided whatever the hell it was that she was going for. Grace got Blanchard in position for a reverse Alabama slam, and Tessa tried and failed to pull off the middle turnbuckle pad. And this right here. See, it was really in many ways the tale of two matches. It wasn't just Jordan Grace against Tessa Blanchard. It was Tessa Blanchard against the turnbuckle pads. Because no matter which turnbuckle pad she tried to rip off, she just could not do it. So she's trying to rip the middle pad off, and she is unsuccessful. And then a little while later, she tried to remove one of the bottom turnbuckles, and she was having a bitch of a time with that one. So moments later, Blanchard drove Grace into the bottom turnbuckle pad for a near fall. The announcers, they tried to cover for it by saying that she moved the pad just enough that it was a factor. Because what else are they going to say? She then pulled at the middle turnbuckle pad. I think this was in a different corner. And finally, after some struggling, she was able to rip it. She didn't even really rip it off. She was able to remove it and kind of slide it. She slid it across the rope so it was out of the way. Like, how tight do they tie those turnbuckle pads? Holy shit. Blanchard bulldogged Grace into the exposed buckle. And then she hit Magnum, leaping from the ropes and hitting a code breaker on the way down, which actually looks sick. I mean, I thought that finish looked great, and she got the 3 count. We were about 20 minutes into this match. Tessa against the turnbuckle pads. If that isn't in the next Botchamania, then Matthew should just hang it up and retire. I'm sorry. Greatest storyline of the night. But this was the match of the night up to this point, and now that the show is over, I can tell you I still think it was the match of the night overall. I did think that it was a few minutes longer than it needed to be, because they really had the crowd going there. And then there was a point where they died down, and it was like one too many near falls. Like, yeah, you've seen matches before where it's like it's going and the crowd's into it and you get a couple of big high spots, and you could be 15 minutes in or 20 minutes in, and it's like, okay, that should have been the finish. But then they just keep going. That's what this felt like. This felt like this could have ended a good 4 or 5 minutes earlier, but they just kept going. But Tessa winning was the obvious outcome here, given that this was Jordan Grace's final night in TNA. PW Insider is reporting the same, that tonight was her final night. And she went out on a high note, that's for sure. She will almost certainly be in the Women's Royal Rumble match in a couple of weeks. I mean, not a doubt in my mind about that. So she was great. Tessa was great. She looked great in the ring. Again, the issue has never been her performance. You know, even when she ended up in CMLL and she was wrestling in Mexico, and I didn't get to see many of her matches down there, but the reports were that, you know, she was great, you know, and she was one of the centerpieces of that women's division. And if you remember her work in TNA, like, her work has never been in dispute. It's her attitude, traditionally, that has been a subject of controversy, and her behavior, whether it be, again, the incident, I guess it was on the independent scene, but whatever happened with WOW Women of Wrestling, and then there was some controversy there at the end of her last run in TNA, where she was the world champion, like the world heavyweight champion. She had the men's title. Then the pandemic hit, and she was in Mexico and didn't want to come back and defend the title. It was a whole thing. So it seems like wherever she's gone, there's always been controversy that has followed her. And a lot of wrestlers have come out and, you know, voiced their displeasure with her and past incidents with her. I mean, we've already documented all of this. Like, that and her in-ring performance are two completely separate things. You saw tonight here on this show what she can do in the ring. What you saw tonight was the woman who I said years ago, it was inevitable, that we were eventually going to get the battle of the daughters of the horsewomen. And it would be a big WrestleMania match one day between Charlotte Flair and Tessa Blanchard. This is before all the controversy happened and the shit hit the fan. She was well on her way to that because she is a quality elite performer. So if she can put in matches like this and keep her head down and stay out of trouble and stay out of controversy and not put her foot in her mouth, she'll get the opportunities that, you know, she would have gotten years ago. Because she would already be there right now. Like, we have WrestleMania coming up in Las Vegas in a few months. And had all that shit not happened, she would be on that card. Like, that's where she would be right now in her career. Not a doubt in my mind. I still think she'll probably end up there. It's just going to take a little bit longer. But whatever you think of her and her past issues, it takes nothing away from the fact that she went out there tonight with Jordynne Grace and they fucking killed it. This was the match of the night. Right behind that, though, was the I Quit match between Mike Santana and the walking weapon, Josh Alexander. 1 year ago this month, Santana's very first defense of the House of Glory World Championship, which he still holds, came against Josh Alexander. And they had a hell of a match. That was a fun match that I got to call. So I knew coming into this firsthand, like, what these two can do together when you put them in the ring. Only it didn't have the I Quit stipulation the first time. And then, of course, all the reports about Josh Alexander and his future. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? This felt like this could have been his swan song as well. Santana is shown backstage. He's walking the halls. He enters through the crowd, through his people. And he gets into the ring, and the two of them charge and meet in the middle of the ring, and the fight is on. And Alexander gets Santana down in a crossface. But Santana rolls, he escapes, and he gets back to his feet. And so Alexander heads out to the floor. Now, the referee's got the microphone in his hand because he's going to ask these guys if they want to quit. There's no pinfalls, there's no submissions. It's an I Quit match. So Santana heads out after him. Alexander, though, dives back into the ring and waves him back in. Fans break out in a chant of "We want tables." And so Santana obliges. Heads out to the floor, pulls a table out from underneath the ring, sets it up, but Alexander takes over. And the fans start getting on Alexander and chanting "Walking Wiener." I don't know where that came from. They chanted "You're still bald." I guess this is the new thing now. You just chant "You're bald" at people, or in the case of Ricochet, "You bald." That's the new thing now. Santana works Alexander over in the corner a little more. Referee gets the microphone, holds it up in Santana's face after Alexander hits a big move. And Santana tells him to get that damn microphone out of my face. So Alexander locks him in an ankle lock. Referee again is asking him, "Do you want to quit?" Santana says no. His boot comes off. It's like WrestleMania, the match with Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero. The boot comes off. And Santana charges at Alexander, who ducks. And Santana gets backdropped out of the ring through a table down below. I think it was it was either a backdrop or he went through the ropes, but either way, he crashed through the table outside. Referee heads outside immediately. He doesn't even have time to absorb the impact. And immediately the referee is there to ask him, and Santana replies, "I don't quit. Get that damn microphone out of my face." So Alexander pulls out another table, and he throws the ring steps into the ring, along with a steel chair. Alexander blasts Santana with the chair. Referee asks him, and Santana says, "No, you're going to have to kill me, Josh." And Alexander basically says, "All right, then." And he begins hitting him over and over again. And Santana begins laughing and says, "There ain't no quit in my blood." So Alexander pulls out some zip ties, and he goes to tie up the hands and the wrists. Santana punches from his back. Alexander, though, beats on him, and he begins pounding him with some vicious elbows. Now, I want you to think of Brock Lesnar and Randy Orton from SummerSlam. I guess that would have been, 2016? When Lesnar was throwing those elbows in him. He did the same thing with John Cena, where he takes the gloves off, he mounts him, and legitimately tries to open the other guy up with elbows, which is a very dangerous thing to do. It's actually safer if you just take a fucking razor blade to cut yourself open, instead of having someone the size of Brock Lesnar take his fucking elbow and try to bust you open hard way. But that's basically what Alexander was doing here. And Santana starts bleeding, although you could tell where he was. There was a moment there where he was obviously, cutting himself open. So I don't think Alexander was laying him in too stiff. But Santana comes up, and he's bleeding. Now, he's not bleeding a lot. He's not bleeding. He's probably pissed at himself after the match because he probably wanted more blood. It's a little bit of blood on his forehead, but he seems to be enjoying it, and he's asking for more. And so Alexander obliges, and he hits his C4 spike on Santana. And Santana no-sells it. And he slowly stands up. He starts slapping himself in the face to a big reaction. And he unloads on Alexander with a barrage of strikes. He goes for a buckle bomb in the corner. Alexander's back actually missed, and the top of his head hit the buckle on the way down. Santana then hit a leaping Hurricane Rana to bring Alexander off the top rope. And he follows up with a big frog splash, and Santana lands his spin the block lariat so hard that it knocks Alexander's mouthpiece out and his headgear off his head. And now he really is bald. And the referee asks Alexander if he quits. He doesn't. Santana gets the zip ties. He ties Alexander's hands behind his back, and he hits him with another spin the block. So the referee asks Josh again, and Alexander again yells no. Santana brings a table into the ring, and he props it up against the corner over Alexander's body because he's crouched, like sitting in the corner. And Santana runs, and he leaps off the ring steps, which are also conveniently placed in the ring, and he hits a cannonball through the table into Alexander in the corner. The thing is, though, the camera was right there, and the table broke, like from Santana's point of view, like it went flawlessly, but the table never even hit Alexander. So when they showed the replay, they showed it from a different angle. It looked better that way. Referee asks him, and again, Alexander refuses to quit. Santana pulls out a slapjack from under the ring. Now, the slapjack, it's basically like a sock stuffed with what we are told are a bunch of cue balls, which is something that like Ortiz and LAX, they used to use all the time. And now remember, Alexander's hands are tied behind his back, and Santana uses the slapjack to beat the living crap out of Alexander with. He's whipping him in the ribs with it over and over and over again. And Alexander's mouth begins to fill up with blood as the announcers are talking about, he could end up with internal injuries, right? Referee takes the microphone, puts it up to Alexander's mouth, and Josh says, "You'll never be the guy, Mike." So Santana puts his boot on the back of Alexander's head. His hands are cuffed behind him, and he is threatening to curb stomp this man onto the steel steps. And finally, Josh Alexander says, I quit, before Santana could do it. Now, after the match, Santana gets on the microphone. He demands that Alexander keep his word and shake his hand. And Santana extends his hand. Alexander reaches out and obliges. He shakes his hand. Now, they're still holding hands, and Alexander says, I'm a man of my word. I said I quit. I'll look you eye to eye and admit you're the new standard of TNA. I quit tonight, but I quit TNA too. And he drops the microphone, he yanks his straps down on his singlet, and he leaves. First off, the match itself, excellent. I thought this was an excellent match. Both men. Alexander is always great. But Mike Santana was, the thing is, I have been singing his praises for a while because I get an up-close and personal view pretty much every month in HOG. But I think the people who have been watching TNA, and obviously I don't catch as much of it as I used to, but I've seen some of Santana's matches, and he's killing it there just as well. Everywhere he goes, he's putting the work in, he's having quality matches. Some of his matches, honestly, are fucking excellent. I mean, some of the best matches that I saw last year are matches that involved him that, the vast majority of fans probably never even saw, but they should have. And what he has done ever since he came back from that torn ACL and he left AEW, because Tony Khan wasn't going to do shit with him, and he knew that, I'm sure. But he left AEW and he went out on his own. He took a chance on himself, and he has been killing it. And I said a long time ago, don't sleep on Mike Santana. Because it's easy to look and go, okay, he was a tag team guy. He's all right, but, he's that tag team guy. No. He was a guy who used to be a part of a tag team. There are a lot of guys who went on to superstardom who used to be part of a tag team. And so I don't know where things are going to take him ultimately. Hopefully it will continue to take him higher and higher. I look at somebody like him. I think that even this year at some point, TNA could very well put their world championship on him. Right now, obviously, it's someone else's turn, but he's the kind of guy that I think they are slowly but surely building up to be the man and to be the person in that spot. And tonight was just another notch on his belt, another quality match, another big win for Mike Santana. Josh Alexander, it looks like he's out the door, but he is still under contract to TNA. Apparently, his deal is not up until the middle of February. And at that point, he'll become a free agent. And he can test the free agent market. They did have a segment where they announced that Santino Marella, who is the authority figure in TNA, he will address Josh Alexander quitting TNA on their Live Impact show coming up this Thursday. Again, that's going to be their first live episode of Impact in 8 years. So for them, it's going to be one of the biggest probably episodes that they've done of the year. It's still early in the year, but it's going to be a big show on Thursday, and so we'll get more clarity. He may not be done yet. I could see him having one more match. If his contract isn't up for another, 3 or 4 weeks, he could wrestle a match on TV possibly. We'll find out more about his status on Impact this week. We had the Hardys, Matt and Jeff, defending their TNA Tag Team Championship against the Rascals, Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz. As soon as they hit the Hardys theme, this crowd just exploded. And they came out and got a huge reaction, loudest of the night. And before things started, though, we had a surprise cameo here by the NXT Tag Team Champions, Fraxium, Nathan Fraser, and Axiom. They make their way out. Holy shit chants ring out. They pull up some chairs. They take a seat at ringside. They're going to get a closer look. They're here to observe. And so the bell sounds and we're underway. And they built to a spot early where Wentz performed a sliding kick that caused the Hardys to bump into Axiom and Fraser outside. And then Wentz stood on the ropes. He held them open while Trey Miguel did a suicide dive that took out Axiom and Fraser rather than the Hardys. They kind of flew over the Hardys and he wiped them out. And the Rascals were very apologetic at first, but then the two teams, they got very heated and they got up in each other's faces, and then TNA security came out and they escorted Fraxium to the back. So that was the last we saw of them. After some back and forth action, Wen set up for a cutter from the ropes. Matt, though, shoved him to ringside, and then Matt put Trey Miguel down with the twist of fate. Jeff hit Trey with a swanton bomb, and he pinned him to retain the tag team titles. Basically, in this match, the Hardys played their greatest hits. And that's all they really had to do, because when you're over as they were tonight, that's really all you need to do. And obviously, they're very limited these days in what they can do. They're not the Hardys of 20 years ago. But they did what they had to do here, and they look good. No reason to take the titles off of them or believe that they would take the titles off of them right now, because as over as they are, at the moment, those titles are more valuable on them, than they would be on somebody else. And as they announced later on, they are now setting up for the Rascals to challenge Fraxium for the NXT Tag Team titles on their Live Impact show this Thursday. So another reason why they're really building that show up in a very big way. Not only are we going to get the announcement about Josh Alexander and whatever's going on with him, but we have an NXT Tag Team title match taking place on Impact this week. We had Masha Slamovich defending her TNA Knockouts Championship against Rosemary in what they called a Clock Orange House of Fun match. Basically a fancy hardcore match is what it was. And the first Clock Orange House of Fun match that the Knockouts have ever had. So the ring had a chain going around like above the top rope. Various weapons were hanging from it. They had weapons in each corner of the ring. As soon as the bell sounds, Masha takes the lead, and she beats down Rosemary with a chair. And she heads to the corner, and she brings down a staple gun. And so I knew right away, okay, it's going to be one of those matches. Before she can use it, though, Rosemary kicks her and takes it, and she tries stapling Masha's face. And Masha ends up stapling Rosemary's hand to break free. Then she staples her in the armpit. And Masha climbs another corner, pulls down a cane. But before she can use it, she got misted in the eyes. Rosemary played to the crowd while she was standing on the apron. Masha then charged and used a crossbody block to knock Rosemary off the apron through a table on the floor. Rosemary reached under the ring at this point, and she pulls out Janice. Janice being the board with the nails in it. This was the calling card of the Monster Abyss back in the day, we were told he mentored Rosemary within the Decay faction many moons ago. But if you don't know the significance behind Janice, if you don't know where the name comes from, to show you how far back this goes, it got its name because Janice was Dixie Carter's mother. So that is where Janice Carter. She has a board with nails in it named after. See, I would be honored if somebody did that. That's a weapon that's still being used today. I don't know where Janice is now. I don't even know if Janice is still alive. I hope she's doing well. So she goes to hit Masha with it. Masha moves, and she ends up breaking the board on the steps. Basically, like the bottom part broke off, and so the top part has all the nails in it. But then she beat down Masha with a piece of Janice on the entrance ramp. Rosemary then disappears to the back. She comes back with a red sack in her hands. And she empties the sack, and out come just a shit ton of thumbtacks just littered all over the stage. Rosemary slams her down onto the tacks and then drags her by the hair down the ramp and back to the ring. Rosemary then hoists her on her shoulders in front of a barbed wire board. But Masha slips out and then hits a snowplow onto the barbed wire board, and she covered Rosemary but only got a near fall. Yes, only a near fall. It's one of the things I hate about these matches. They will do these spots that should be a finish, and it's just a transition into something else. So then Slamovich went to the ropes and double stomped Rosemary onto the barbed wire board for yet another near fall. Masha climbed to almost the very top of a ladder that was in the ring, and Rosemary pushed the ladder over, which caused Masha to crash through the first of two tables that were positioned on the floor, and it looked like her head smacked the edge of the second table. Like, it was a disgusting bump, and she is very lucky that she wasn't seriously injured, which reminds me, The other thing I saw a clip of, and talk about disgusting, on the GCW show tonight, I was sad to see that Allie Katch got hurt. I think she was wrestling Effie. And she did what looked like a very simple, again, simple by the standards of all the shit that we see these days. She did a dive out of the ring, like kind of a normal dive. And just the way she landed, because I saw the video clip, you could tell her leg, her ankle, was bent in the completely opposite direction. And I could have sworn I heard a snap, too, when she landed. And then she immediately grabbed her leg and looked down and realized, oh, shit. And I believe they stopped the match. They took her out on a stretcher. She broke her leg. And that's horrible to see that happen to anybody. But yeah, that was pretty nasty. See, and think about it. Like, think of all of the crazy fucking spots that we saw in this match alone. And it's on a simple dive out of the ring on the other show that somebody broke their leg. Right? I mean, Chris Bay. I mentioned Chris Bay before. Now, we unless you were in the building that night, we've never seen footage of the spot in ABC's match with the Hardys where he got hurt. But all the reports were that it was, nothing too crazy or nothing too out of the ordinary. And the guy breaks his neck. I mean, sometimes it's the simple things, but even the simple things are not so simple. To these guys, obviously they're professionals, but shit can go sideways very easily, even on the simplest of moves. But when you have a match like this and you're constantly trying to, top yourselves and top each other, and you're trying to elevate the level of danger. Like when I saw her head, and again, maybe it didn't smack the table, it looked like it did, but I mean that, one bad bump, you smash your head like that into something, and it's just awful. But thankfully she seemed to be okay. But since it was a Falls Count Anywhere match, Rosemary covers her and Masha kicks out. Back in the ring, Rosemary sets up 4 chairs, places Masha on top of them. Rosemary goes up top. Slamovich sat up, joined her on the ropes, and then finally finished her off with her Requiem package pile driver from the ropes onto the chairs down below, and she pinned her. It sounded like the fans liked both women during this match, and so I wonder if that had to do with how quiet they sounded for parts of this, because for the really big bumps, they reacted, but it sounded like they were just either tired or didn't really know who to root for. They busted their asses. They took some hellacious bumps here, but this just wasn't really, this was not my favorite match of the night. Let's just put it that way. And I'm not sure if their feud really warranted this. I'll defer to all of you on that who have been following this week to week, because I haven't been watching their segments week to week, but I don't know. It didn't come off that way to me. Now, after the match, Masha is holding up her TNA Knockouts Championship high in the air, and her music cuts off, and she is interrupted by the theme song for one, Cora Jade from NXT. And out comes Cora, and everybody reacts big to it. Because Cora has not been like a women's champion yet in NXT, but she definitely has her fan base. That's for sure. And she is featured heavily on the show. So she comes out, gets in the ring, and she confronts Masha, who just smiles at her and raises her Knockouts title high up in the air, clearly teasing a future title match between these two. And so that is how they close that. Now, they needed time to clean up all of the crap and all of the debris from the previous match. So they gave us a little segment on stage where Santino Marella was out there with the pre-show crew. They had Gia Miller, and then she was also joined by the members of Busted Open Nation. They had Mark Henry and Tommy Dreamer and Dave LaGreca. And he had, Santino had them each deliver their predictions for the main event. And I think it was before Tommy Dreamer could give his prediction, they were interrupted by Ryan Nemeth, who kept saying, "my brother," over and over again while explaining that his brother would not be very happy and he didn't care what Tommy Dreamer thinks. So Santino then banned Ryan from ringside during the main event, because I guess on TV they were teasing the possibility that he might get involved. So he was formally banned from ringside, and then security escorted Ryan to the back. And that led into our main event of the evening, which was Nick Nemeth, the older Nemeth, defending the TNA World Championship against Joe Hendry. They were wrestling for a little while before Ryan Nemeth showed back up, even though he was barred from ringside. Didn't say anything about being in the crowd. But it was funny because they were talking about the show being at capacity and basically being sold out. But yet here's Ryan Nemeth and he's got a ticket. And they're talking about how he bought a ticket. I'm like, how do you buy a fucking ticket if you're sold out? But there he was. And he had his ticket and he took a seat. Hendry put Nick down with a cutter and went for his standing ovation finish. But Nick avoided it and Hendry placed him on the top turnbuckle. He was setting up for something. But Nick headbutted him and knocked him off the ropes. Nemeth then performed a crossbody block that Hendry rolled through, and he set up for an attitude adjustment that Nick countered with a famouser for a near fall. Tom Hannafin on commentary said that Nick has been on the receiving end of a few attitude adjustments over the years, and he knows how to counter them. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. He's pretty much taken everybody's finish. He should be an expert at this point. Nick went up top. Hendry ran up after him and caught Nick for a fall-away slam off the top. And both men were down when here comes Frankie Kazarian, walking out with the Call Your Shot trophy. And he climbs up onto the apron when all of a sudden John Layfield appears out of the crowd. And he goes to ringside. He pulls Kazarian down. And he delivers a clothesline from hell to take him out. Layfield then went over and punched out Ryan Nemeth, which is exactly what he did at Bound for Glory. And with that, Layfield just left back through the crowd, never to be seen again. Now, we saw him get involved in the previous match between these two at Bound for Glory, and it didn't work out too well for Joe Hendry. They still have not explained anything about why this man keeps interfering in these matches. Like even on the indies, everywhere he goes, he just shows up and he clotheslines people and then he leaves and there's no context to it. There's been no explanation for why. He hasn't actually wrestled a match in over a decade, I think. It's just he shows up and he clotheslines or punches someone and leaves. I mean, look, it's not bad work if you can get it. I'd love to know what he's charging for a gig. He's going to be on Raw tomorrow night. Doing what they haven't told us, but he's going to be there. He's everywhere. He may be in the Royal Rumble. So in the ring, Hendry hit his standing ovation finish, and he covered Nick for a close near fall. Hendry was stunned. Hannafin said that nobody had ever kicked out of it before. So the crowd chanted one more time. Hendry was about to oblige them, but Nick slipped out, and then Nemeth super kicked him and hit Danger Zone. He hit the zigzag. Only got a near fall, so Nick was stunned. He tuned up the band. He went for a super kick. Hendry stuffed it and hit a fall-away slam. Hendry kicked up and followed with one more standing ovation and covered Nick Nemeth for the 3 count to finally win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. When the match was over, Hendry went to ringside and hugged his parents, and then he went off into the crowd to celebrate with the people, who were very happy, and they all sung his song, and they swayed back and forth. They had a good match. It was by no means the best match of the night. I thought that the couple of distractions there, the Ryan Nemeth thing and the JBL thing, I mean, he appeared in the last match, and so I guess this kind of followed up on that, but it was unnecessary. I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to build drama like, oh no, he's going to get fucked over again. But yeah, at the end of the day, there were a couple of unnecessary distractions. In the end, they gave the people what they wanted, finally. They gave them the crowd-pleasing title win. This was Joe Hendry's crowning moment. And he's a great story to look back on because here's a guy who, using his music talents, was able to get himself over in the professional wrestling realm. That song, when it went viral and it took off last year, at one point was, I don't know if it was number 1 or number 4, or it was up in the top 5, I think, of singles on the UK charts. Like, it was climbing the charts. It was the hot thing. My best friend, he's got a young daughter. And when we brought Joe Hendry into House of Glory back in September, he had never been to a hog show before, but he's like, I'm coming to that show because she wants to meet Joe Hendry. And so I saw her reaction and all the kids when they met him and everything. And it's like, wow, I mean, this guy, hopefully TNA knows what they have in this guy. And this was the month before Bound for Glory. And then he went to Bound for Glory in his second opportunity and he lost again. And I'm just like scratching my head here. But now, you look at what they did. And it's pretty clear what they did here. What they did is they wanted to wait and put the TNA World title on him right before the Royal Rumble. So they can get their TNA World Heavyweight Champion and that belt, some exposure in front of, there's going to be 55,000 plus. I think they've already moved 56,000 tickets for the Royal Rumble in Indianapolis. It's going to be a huge show. Not a doubt in my mind. We will be seeing Joe Hendry very soon in the Royal Rumble. And it would not shock me if that's the reason why they held off. They wanted to wait, put the title on him, and then very shortly thereafter, with all the momentum he now has from winning the championship, riding high, he makes a big appearance in the Royal Rumble, and you have 55,000 people singing his song and swaying back and forth. Because even if there are people in that crowd who have no fucking idea who this guy is, and there will be people who don't know who he is, the majority of the people will. And he's going to get a big reaction, and they're going to sing the song, and it's going to be a huge moment for TNA to gloat about, even though he's not going to win. But it's cool to see somebody who is self-made, somebody who got himself over. And yeah, he's not the flashiest guy in the world. He doesn't have the best physique. He doesn't have the flashiest moveset, but he's over, and he's popular, and people like him. And sometimes that's all you need. You don't have to look the best. You don't have to be the best wrestler. Sometimes there's just no explanation for why some people get over and other people don't. That's just the way it is. Look at all the times that Vince McMahon tried to push one guy, but the fans dictated otherwise. We don't want Lex Luger. We want Bret Hart. Right? We don't want John Cena. We're tired of him. We want to boo him. We want Bryan Danielson. Right? And you could find, wrestling history is littered with examples of this. Joe Hendry got himself over. And tonight was his crowning moment. It may be the peak for him, but hopefully he can continue to ride this wave. He's a good guy. He deserves all of his success. And again, it was a crowd-pleasing moment to send the fans home happy. Overall, I thought it was an enjoyable show. They had a lively crowd. Jordynne Grace and Tessa Blanchard, they stole the show. Santana and Alexander, I would put them in a close second. Some interesting NXT cameos to set up future matches. And the big title win at the very end. Yeah, I mentioned Joe being in the Royal Rumble. I wouldn't be shocked if we get a Nick Nemeth cameo in the Rumble and he eliminates Joe Hendry to set up the inevitable rematch, because they're going to run this back one more time. But I do wonder, would they refer to him by his real name or would they call him Dolph Ziggler? I would think it would almost be a slap in the face to just go back to Dolph Ziggler. If he's still working for TNA, you call him Nick Nemeth, but I don't know. They can call him Nick Nemeth and just on commentary say formally Dolph Ziggler. But I wonder how they would handle that. I guess we won't have to wait very long to find out. But anyway, I had fun watching this show. And hopefully you had fun listening to this review. We haven't covered TNA here like this in a while, so I figured why the hell not. If you missed it, well over 2 hours. Brand new podcast, episode 897 of The Sound Off. Went up earlier today. Go check it out. If you have not already done so, leave some feedback, 5 stars on Spotify, comments also on Spotify, all that good stuff. And I will see you back here very soon for more Sound Off. Of course, I'll be with you live in less than 24 hours on YouTube for the Monday Night Raw post show. So until then, be well, stay safe, and I will see you there on YouTube. Until then, take care, guys.